Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Superheroes, Movies, and Superhero Movies. I'm Justin Speck.
I'm John Pelzel.
And today we're talking about X-Men: The Last Stand. Released in 2005, directed by Brett Ratner, written by Simon Kinberg and Zach Penn, and starring a whole bunch of people, starting with Hugh Jackman, Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen, Halle Berry, Famke Janssen, Anna Paquin, James Marsden, Rebecca Romijn, Kelsey Grammer, Shawn Ashmore, Ellen Page, Vinnie Jones, Ben Foster, and a few other folks. This was the follow-up to X-Men United, and it was kind of like, in my opinion, it was kind of like Spider-Man 2 going into Spider-Man 3, where the second movie was really good, and everybody got super pumped, and so then everybody was really excited about part 3, and then was pretty let down. And I think part of that is the fact that Bryan Singer left. Bryan Singer did X-Men 1, X-Men 2, and then I think kind of left. I don't know. I wish I knew like the actual. I wish I could talk to Brett Ratner or something and kind of figure out what the actual story was, because from what I heard, it was like Bryan Singer left to do Superman Returns, and then I don't know if this movie was rushed into production or if he kind of left in pre-production to go do Superman Returns. But Brett Ratner was brought in very late, like within a couple months of shooting, a couple months away from shooting. And so I think a lot of the pre-production stuff had kind of already been done, and then they literally just brought him in to shoot the movie and maybe oversee post-production.
I meant to look this up to confirm it before we did the podcast, but so what I have heard is not necessarily what happened, but and I don't know about the time period going, but as far as Bryan Singer goes, his Richard Donner's wife was
a producer. Yeah, yep.
And I heard that one day Richard Donner was around and they were talking about Superman or something, and Bryan Singer kind of said, "Hey, I've got some ideas for Superman," and went over them with Richard Donner, and Richard Donner was, kind of giving him the go-ahead to make a sequel to the Christopher Reeve movies, and that's why, I heard that Bryan Singer left was, yes, to do Superman Returns, and it was because of his conversations with Richard Donner.
That'd be interesting. So he might have left in pre-production, which would be kind of sucks a little bit. The fact that he was like had maybe signed on to direct X-Men 3 and then was like, you know what? Never mind. I'm gonna go do Superman. And
but can you blame him?
No,
because at the time, Superman hadn't been done since Superman 4. Like
right.
That was a big deal.
Right. Well, they had been trying to get Superman off the ground for years.
Yeah.
They had almost had that Nicolas Cage version, and then there was a couple other directors.
And that's the other
stuff.
thing, is that it was going to be a reboot, but to be able to not only do a Superman movie since 4, but to technically do a sequel to the Reeves movies, like, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. No, yeah, I agree. I don't blame him, and I'm looking forward to the day when we can talk about Superman Returns. But
yes.
But it also, I think, kind of just sucks a little bit for the cast and crew of X-Men 3. Now, the question I have, though, is, James Marsden was cast in Superman Returns.
Right.
And Rebecca Romijn, I heard, also had some scheduling conflicts, so I don't know why they would have scheduling conflicts if they were already signed on to do X-Men 3. So that's where, the timeline doesn't quite make sense to me. Because I think James Marsden went to go do Superman Returns, so he couldn't really be there for X-Men 3. But if he had already signed on for X-Men 3, I don't see them being like, yeah, you can go make Superman. We'll just ride around you.
Not to mention, he's really in Superman Returns about as much as he is in this movie.
He's in Superman Returns a little bit more than this movie, I think. He's barely in this movie, but yeah, he's not he's not Superman, so it's, I don't know why I don't know. Well, I know Superman also was shot in Australia, so I don't know if, he had to, I have no idea. That's what I'm saying. I wish I could talk to Brett Ratner and kind of figure out the timeline, figure out when Bryan Singer left, was Was it delayed a little bit to the point where they lost a couple actors? I don't know. But Matthew Vaughn was attached to direct it for a short period of time. And then he left, and that's when Brett Ratner came in.
What has Matthew Vaughn done?
He directed Kick-Ass, and he also directed Layer Cake with Daniel Craig, if you ever saw that movie.
I have not, but I know of it.
He also directed a little film called X-Men First Class.
Yes, he did, didn't he? Now I know the name. Okay.
Yeah. So he eventually came back to the X-Men universe, I guess, but I think he was attached to this movie for a little while, and I don't know if he read the script and was like, nah. I don't know. But eventually he came back for X-Men First Class. But this is so this came out in 2005, like I said, and I saw it in the theater, and I saw it a couple times, but not because I like loved it. I just saw it a couple times. Did you?
Yeah,
You
I
saw
think
this
I'd seen it a couple times also. This might have been my third time seeing, I'm guessing.
Yeah. I've seen this movie a few times, and I've watched it since it's come out on DVD, and I never have hated this movie. I know this movie gets a lot of hate, but rewatching it today, I think I liked it less today than probably whenever the last time I watched it. Like I said, I never really hated the movie, but watching it today, I was kind of like, it's not great. It has a lot of, I mean, part of it, one of the things I don't like about it is they kill off everybody, basically, you know what I mean? They, just to get right into spoilers, Cyclops dies.
Very early.
Professor X dies, yeah. I mean, Jean Grey dies, I guess, but I feel like they kill off some other people. I can't remember.
Well, those are the only tombstones you see at the end.
Rogue gets her powers taken away, although it's
That's true.
hinted that they'll come back.
Right.
And I couldn't help but think about, this obviously X-Men Days of Future Past was a long way out when this movie came out, but I couldn't help but think of that movie because X-Men Days of Future Past kind of resets the timeline.
Yes.
But Xavier's alive in X-Men Days of Future Past. Magneto has his powers in X-Men Days of Future Past.
Yes.
And Rogue has her powers in X-Men Days of Future Past.
Yeah, it's almost as if Days of Future Past is like there was no X-Men 3.
Right, but at the same time, at the
You're right,
end of X-Men Days of Future Past, like Logan's all surprised when Scott and Jean are there because
yeah, you're right.
They were supposed to be dead.
And there's some other correlation. I can't remember what it was, but yeah, there's something else they took with X-Men Last Stand that was in Days of Future Past. I can't remember what it was, but yeah, you're right.
So it's like they kind of cherry picked, I guess, what they wanted to use and what they were like, forget about that part. So yeah, kind of strange. Still a good movie. Have we talked about that one, Days of Future Past? I feel
we've done X-Men in order.
Yeah, you're right. So we got a few X-Men movies to still talk about.
Did we do First Class?
I think, maybe we have done First Class. I'd have to go back and look at the episodes. I can't remember.
I think we might have done First Class, actually.
This movie starts off with Xavier and Magneto showing up at Jean Grey's house when she's a kid. And we see a younger-looking Professor X and a younger-looking Magneto. And the first note I wrote was that de-aging effect has come a long way since 2005.
Yes,
because it does not look very good in this movie.
That is very true. Also, it says 20 years later, so where would that put us?
I don't know. In the very first X-Men movie, it always says...
it would have been 85.
Yeah, but the first X-Men movie always says it's like in the not too distant future.
Yeah, you're right, and this did as well. So
I don't know
actually
exactly.
After 1985, and that's something else that maybe that's what I was thinking of, and it actually goes against X-Men 3 from Days of Future Past is the fact that Professor Xavier is walking.
Right.
Because because Days of Future Past was the 70s, right?
Yes, it was.
And he's paralyzed there. Well,
no, he is because he gets paralyzed at the end of First Class.
Right.
Yeah, so
and then he has that like cure thing that's allowing him to
walk. Yeah, it takes away his psychic powers and allows him to walk.
Right.
Because he's kind of depressed, I think, in that movie, and
Yeah, he's drinking.
he's drinking, and
He's got a bit of a drinking problem.
right, and so he doesn't. I guess his ability to walk is more important to him than his mutant powers. So yeah, the timeline is all kind of wackadoodle in these movies. It doesn't make sense if you really think about it. I almost kind of view these three movies as a trilogy, then the X-Men First Class movies as a
Right. Yeah,
It's not really a trilogy. There's four of them, but
Speaking of which, I have not seen Dark Phoenix yet, and I know what you're going to say. I am not missing much.
You're not missing much. It's funny because I was pretty excited about Dark Phoenix because I thought, okay, so they're gonna do the Phoenix story again,
Right.
And
It's
they'll
basically
get it
like
right this time.
Yeah, it was basically like Bryan Singer was like, I didn't do Last Stand, now I'm going to do Last Stand, like the way that I would have done it.
Right.
But
Well, he didn't direct that one.
I thought he did.
No, Simon Kinberg. So one of the writers of this movie wrote and directed Dark Phoenix.
Oh.
So Bryan Singer did Apocalypse and Days of Future Past, but he did not do Dark Phoenix.
I thought he did Dark Phoenix also. Okay.
Nope.
Never mind.
Well, yeah. So I was thinking they were going to do the Dark Phoenix storyline and kind of do it the right way, especially because in the preview you see Jean Grey and the crew in space. But no, it was terrible.
Huh.
Obviously,
Well, it's funny because,
Well, I was gonna say we'll talk about that movie as well at some point, but
yeah, we'll talk about Apocalypse, and I was going to say, I heard Apocalypse was not very good, and I didn't know how I could believe it. And then I watched it.
I was gonna say, have you seen it?
Which
And that's
really
super
shocked
disappointing.
me.
Yeah, I mean, Apocalypse, in my opinion, is better than Dark Phoenix. I think my wife disagrees with me on that, but Apocalypse was such a cool character, and I loved seeing him in the animated series.
Yes.
That was the biggest disappointment of all. Is just that he just wasn't as cool of a character.
Isn't
as he
it
could have
Oscar
been.
Isaac?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
That's what I thought. Apocalypse was maybe my favorite villain. It's funny because it was either him or Juggernaut.
Yeah.
And obviously we're going to get to talk about Juggernaut in this episode.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll save Juggernaut for a little bit, but so do you remember what your initial reaction to the movie was when you saw it in theater?
Yeah, I was definitely let down.
Yeah.
I don't think I was as let down my first time watching it as I was the second time. And second time, I remember liking it even less. And then I had this long period of time where I just didn't watch it. And I remember, up to the point that we just watched it, thinking X-Men 3 is awful.
Yeah.
Like I hated it and just had like a disdain and loathing for it. I would say that has kind of gone away after watching. But
Still not great.
yeah, it's like basically I knew that I didn't like it, and my expectations were so low for it
Yeah.
that when I watched it, I was like, this isn't as bad as I remembered.
Yeah, I think that helps, kind of going, okay, this movie's terrible, and then watching it and being like, all right, it's watchable.
Yeah.
I misspoke in the beginning of this episode and said this movie was released in 2005. It was actually 2006.
Okay.
Because I had a memory of being at the Capitol the first time we interned at the state capitol and watching the trailer for it, and I was like, well, hold on. We interned in 2006. How did I watch the trailer for it if the movie came out in 2005? So I just double-checked. It was 2006. But I remember seeing the trailer for this movie and thinking it looked so good. Yeah. I mean, we saw some elements of the Danger Room. We saw Magneto flipping the cars, which watching the movie this time around, when Magneto flips those cars when he's getting into the mobile prison, it didn't actually look that good. So I'm like, maybe it was just a quick clip in the trailer that looked good to me back then. I don't know, but
oh, I didn't see an issue with it necessarily.
I don't know. It just didn't. It almost looked like part of it was sped up, and it just didn't. I don't know. It just didn't have that wow factor that I remember having.
I loved when he crushes them though.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
It's like the first one he crushes, and then the second one it goes to a shot inside the vehicle, and you see the people in there driving, and it reminds you there are people in those cars. Like,
Right.
yeah, obviously you
It
know
just
people are
crushed
driving
to
them,
death.
but
Yeah.
it puts you there, and you see them, and then the second one crush, and they're
Yeah.
gone. And I thought that was, I really liked that.
Yeah. After we meet Jean Grey and we kind of move to the future, we get our two first kind of live action firsts, I guess you could say. The first look at the Danger Room, even though I don't think we're supposed to know it's the Danger Room just yet.
Right.
And then it's a little bit of a cheat, but our first look at a live action Sentinel.
Right.
We don't
sort of.
really
It's-
get it.
it's
Yeah, I was
just
going to
the head.
say.
Yeah.
It's just the head, and like you do see him walking, but it's like a silhouette with like just the bright eyes. So that's why I said it's kind of a cheat. But that was still cool back then to kind of get that Easter egg, kind of.
And the fact that Wolverine was the one that decapitated
Right.
him.
Yeah. Exactly.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. And I remember that shot. That was one of the shots from the trailer where I was like, "Whoa!" It's kind of like a shot from down below of Wolverine standing there, and there's a big explosion behind him.
Yeah, and then they have the head, right?
I mean, that was later. I think it's like that was one of the first shots you see of Wolverine is him
But
standing
I'm
there.
saying,
in
wasn't that in
explosion.
the trailer? Wasn't the head?
Oh,
in the
it might
trailer?
have been. Yeah, the Sentinel head might have been in the trailer. Yeah.
It seems like it was, and now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, especially since that's the only time you see it, I'm like, that's kind of a
Bummer to put in the trailer.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously they wanted to get people hyped.
Excited about it, yeah. Well, I think that was probably another disappointment. I mean, we saw if we did see the Sentinel head in the trailer, I would have been like, "Oh my god, Sentinels
Yeah, we
are in
thought
this movie."
there were going to be like hundreds of Sentinels and like a big Sentinel battle.
And then it was just the head, and it was part of the Danger Room sequence, so it wasn't even a real Sentinel.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a little disappointing. And I really, as much as I love X-Men: Days of Future Past, and I'm trying not to talk about that movie too much in this episode, but I do wish we could see the Sentinels look good in that movie. I thought, but I wish we could see some more. I wish we could see Sentinels that looked a little bit more reminiscent of how they looked on the animated
purple
series.
and red,
right? And just like the bigger body, and everything.
Yes.
Like they made him kind of skinnier in Days of Future Past. They're still big and still cool,
like 40, 50 feet tall.
Yeah.
Yeah, like exactly. I would love to see the traditional Sentinel.
Yeah, it'd be cool.
Maybe one day.
Maybe one day.
I mean, now Marvel Studios.
That's true. They own it now.
Has the rights, so that would be pretty awesome.
Yeah.
That is now. Remember how I was talking about Marvel? I was kind of like they've kind of run out. If they reboot X-Men, which they will, that will be something that will drive me to the theater.
Yes. And I think X-Men is a bigger draw because they also now have the rights to Fantastic Four.
Right.
And so I'm excited to see a Marvel Studios produce Fantastic Four movie. I think that'll be really good. I love the Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
But I do think X-Men will be the bigger box office draw.
Yes.
I don't think there is many. The general public, I don't think, is clamoring as much for a Fantastic Four movie as they would the new Wolverine.
X-Men is going to be big.
Stuff. Yeah. And I hope I know it might look cheesy. I don't know. I mean, I would like to see them in kind of the more traditional costumes.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Right.
I don't know. I don't know how that would translate to the big screen. They kind of hinted at that at the end of Apocalypse too, but we have not really, other than that glimpse, we haven't really seen anybody in the traditional costumes, and I think it would be really cool.
I mean, as far as the Avengers go, they pretty much stuck to as obviously Thor didn't have the they had it in the beginning, but but as far as the regular
body
outfit,
armor and everything,
they stuck to pretty much the same for most of the characters.
Yeah.
And it would definitely be interesting to see what they chose to do with Wolverine.
Yeah, I mean, it would be amazing to see Wolverine in the mask and the yellow suit and everything. I think that'd be pretty cool.
Man, yeah, no kidding.
So we got introduced to a couple new X-Men this movie, and number one was Beast, played by Kelsey Grammer. And I think Kelsey Grammer was the perfect choice to play Beast.
Yes. I was going to say, we were talking recently about characters that you can't picture someone else playing.
Right.
And when I saw him rewatching this, that immediately came to my mind, and I was like, he was made. I mean, he wasn't made for the role, but
He was perfect for the role.
he was perfect. Exactly.
I read some trivia that, and I don't know how true this is, but I read some trivia that he really wanted to play the role of Beast to the point where he was willing to like audition for the part, and he hadn't auditioned for anything in years because he'd been playing Frasier for so long and was pretty well established. But he really wanted to play Beast, and so he read for the part and got the part.
That's so funny that he chose Beast because it is such a Kelsey Grammer character. Like he, to me, is the closest that out of all of the movies. Even just he is the one that came out of the '90s animated series.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, is perfect.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree, and I really liked him in the movie, and I enjoyed every time he was on screen. I thought he looked cool. I thought he
looks great.
He embodies Beast perfectly.
Yes.
So yeah, that's one of the shining stars of this film is Beast.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Saving
Maybe
graces,
the
I
only
guess.
one.
Might be the only one, yeah. Well, the other big character that we got, and I say big, but he's really not that integral, I guess, to the story, is Ben Foster's Angel.
Right.
And
yeah, he's really not in it that much.
No.
Like, compared to the way they introduce him at the beginning, like, you think he would have been in it a lot more, but he's really barely in it.
He's barely in it. And I even wrote, one of my notes is Ben Foster is too good for this movie. Because he's underused. Ben Foster is an amazing actor, and I think he was a good choice for Angel. But other than seeing him, he's the son of the guy who has come up with the cure that can cure the mutant gene or whatever. And Angel at the last minute decides that he doesn't want to do it, and he runs head first out of the glass, which I think is kind of silly now, and flies away. And then after that, you don't see him for a really long time. Then he shows up at Professor X's school after Professor X has died, and he's like, I heard this was a safe place for mutants. And they're like, we'll find you a room. And then after that, he like eavesdrops on Wolverine or something when they're talking about the fight going down in San Francisco, and then he saves his dad at the end. And that's like all he's in the movie.
Yep.
It's like 4 scenes or something. I would say that I'm curious to see if there was any deleted scenes with him, but it really doesn't feel like it.
Right.
Unless, I wonder if maybe a couple of those eavesdropping scenes or something were like reshoots. They had to kind of just to like fit it in because all of his other stuff got cut out. I don't know, but
it's like when they were writing the story, he was intended to be one of the main characters, and then as the story progressed, he just kind of was left out of it, and
yeah,
they're like, well, we don't really have anywhere to put him.
We'll just throw him here and there. Yeah, which is a waste because I really like Angel and I really like Archangel.
Archangel is really what I think of. So yeah, when I think of
Warren Worthington,
I think of Archangel, which is an association with Apocalypse.
Right. Yeah.
So I remember because he was definitely in the trailer.
Angel, yeah, he was.
Yeah, and I remember thinking, "Oh, are we going to be getting Apocalypse like?"
Right.
So,
yeah, I think you and I probably had a conversation about that because seeing Angel, you go, "Okay, cool, he's Angel in this movie," but Angel eventually becomes Archangel. Like, are we going to get to see that? That would be amazing. So the only X-Men Funko
especially
Pop,
with him like cutting off his wings,
right? Yeah. Oh yeah.
So.
I was going to say, the only X-Men Funko Pop I have is Archangel.
Oh, interesting.
I never, for whatever, I got him because I loved Archangel.
Archangel was actually, I believe, my first X-Men figure.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I don't know if I ever had the action figure of him, but I do remember really liking that character.
You remember the old series I showed you where you've got the Wolverine with like the orange, and then you had Storm in the black suit, and she has the white hair. Like, he was a part of that.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome. I have been wanting to rebuy. I used to have, you and I both, we talked about this before. I used to have a lot of the X-Men trading cards.
Yes.
I can't remember which series it was, but it was one of the early 90s series. And I've looked them up on eBay, and they've got, you can buy like the complete sets from, 91, 92, 93, whatever. And I have always debated on, pulling the trigger and just buying a complete set because I love those cards. I thought those cards were always
You
so
talking
cool.
about the Marvel Masterpieces?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's one of the sets, I think. I think there's
Because
some other sets.
I'm going to probably pull the trigger here soon.
Yeah, you should because they're awesome.
Off
The
the
artwork
record.
is good.
Off the record. That's one of the things I lost. And
Really?
yeah,
She took your cards?
Huh? No. Your brother.
Oh, I thought you meant in the divorce. I was
No.
like, that's so weird.
No. I lost.
My brother took us up to Goodwill.
I had the whole series set of the 1992 and 1993 Marvel Masterpieces. Except one of my friends back in the day, I think, stole like 5 or 6 of them that they didn't have.
Oh, yeah.
They disappeared. But yeah, that was one of the things that I missed. So I'm going to have to rebuy those.
Yeah.
Because those were awesome. The artwork was so good.
Yeah.
Anyway, back on the record.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, so getting back to the movie, I guess. Let me look at my notes here. This is kind of a silly note, but they announced the cure at Worthington Labs, which is on Alcatraz Island, I guess.
Right.
It's where
Speaking
the
of which,
prison
what
is.
did you think of the story?
Well, one of the last notes I wrote was this movie almost feels like it had 2 storylines and they couldn't decide on which one was the better story. And so they kind of just put them both into the movie. One of which is the mutant cure, and the other is Jean Grey, Phoenix.
Yeah, you're right.
Because especially during the final battle, Jean Grey just stands there and does nothing. When they're fighting all the people at Alcatraz,
Right.
she stands there and does nothing until Magneto is stabbed with the cure needles. Magneto turns to her and he says something like, "This is what they want," or something. I can't remember what he says exactly, and that's when she starts becoming all Phoenix and
Yeah, you're right.
destroying everything. And it's just like, what has she been doing?
Right.
It just was weird, and it felt like they didn't know.
Well, she was so powerful. It was like, we got to have a battle without her like destroying everything first.
Yeah, and that's the other complaint I have about this movie is they talk about, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but we've never heard about mutant classes before this movie, right?
Correct.
Like they talk about class 3 mutants and class 4 mutants, and Jean Grey is supposedly the only class 5 mutant out of anybody, I guess.
No, that's not what was said. It was. Who'd you say? Phoenix?
Jean Grey.
Yes, Jean Grey is. I thought. Okay, yeah, not
What did
Phoenix.
I say? Oh,
you
Jean
might
Grey.
have said Jean Grey, and I might have just thought Phoenix. But yeah, you're right. Jean Grey is class 5. Yes.
She's the only class 5.
No, I think he said she's the first class 5 that he's worked with. I could be wrong.
Well, either way, I take it as Xavier's not a class 5. He's got to be a class 4, and Magneto's a class 4. And if Magneto is a class 4, he's moving the the Golden Gate Bridge. And that's pretty powerful. And yet I don't feel like we saw anything from Jean Grey that was more powerful than that.
I disagree. She basically disintegrated both Scott and Charles.
Yeah, but I feel like Magneto, I feel like he could have done, he could disintegrate somebody unless they got metal in them, but I feel like Magneto is a pretty powerful mutant.
He is.
And he's only a class 4. My whole complaint is the class system.
Right.
They obviously introduced it so that they could say Jean Grey is this super powerful being. She's so powerful. She's more powerful than Professor X and Magneto. She's a class 5, and we're supposed to go like, oh wow. But we don't. In my opinion, we don't really see anything that proves that.
Right, not in this movie. And granted, I can't really think of anything in particular because the only other knowledge I have of Phoenix is from the animated series.
Right.
And I don't even know if I finished the Phoenix Saga, but I do know just on reputation that Phoenix is considered
super powerful.
Ridiculously powerful.
Yeah, and I'm sure she is. I just don't think it was portrayed in this movie that way.
Right. Also, I went back and looked up the class stuff. And that has been a thing
in the comics.
I'm not sure if they were considered classes though, and also I don't know if it happened before the movie. I'm guessing it probably did.
Yeah,
but I'm not sure.
Well, that if it's in the comics, that's one thing, I guess. But it's just we had never heard about it in X-Men 1. We didn't hear about it in X-Men 2. Suddenly they bring it up in X-Men 3, and I think it was literally just to tell us that Jean Grey is powerful. And then because I don't think they ever talk about it again in any of the other X-Men movies.
Right.
So that's just a complaint of mine. It just felt like weak writing a little bit, you know?
Right. Kind of like Metachlorians.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Ugh. So yeah, that was we jumped around kind of towards the end there because you were talking about the storyline. Well, what did you think about the Cure storyline? I think that was what you really were asking.
Yeah, about. I liked it.
Yeah, I like that aspect too. And Leech, I like that it's Leech, the mutant that who's I guess Beast, takes away your powers essentially.
Beast goes up and reaches out, and his hand turns human. Like that was
right.
Cool.
Yeah, I like that too. I think that's pretty neat.
And it really is an emotional connect too.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's something that divides them. Like you've got Storm, saying, "Well, we're not a disease. Like there's nothing to like." She says to Rogue, "Like there's nothing wrong with you.
There's nothing to cure."
Right.
Yeah.
So
and I like that aspect of it. I like that it kind of divides the mutants about a little bit. There's mutants who really are intrigued by the cure, and then there's mutants who are really against it.
Right.
And I think that storyline, honestly, is more interesting than the Phoenix storyline.
Yes,
in this movie.
It is. Which is interesting because it feels like to me that the whole cure thing is kind of a cliche, simple story.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, it turns out to be the one that I think has way more emotion behind it, and it just seems more one that is interesting for the audience.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
But it almost seems like a introduction story. Like this would have been the story for X-Men 1 or something.
Right. Rather than X-Men 3.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. I think the main character who has the most emotional impact on is Rogue. And like Rogue is the one character who I totally understand is like excited about having a cure because she can't have any of this human contact. And then of course they introduced Kitty Pryde in this movie and Bobby Drake, that's his name, right? Iceman.
Yes.
He is there's like almost a love triangle between the three of them. At least that's how Rogue sees it.
I mean, he's ice skating with her and twirling and
yes, I'd
say there's some interest there.
It's possible. According to him, there wasn't, but
he's a liar.
Maybe he's a liar. Yeah, maybe he's a liar. So I totally understand why Rogue would be interested in the cure. That's all I really was going to have to say. That was all I was saying about that.
Okay. Yeah. And Beast
too, yeah. Anybody like who has, like if Nightcrawler had been in this movie,
he's like, you
don't shed on the furniture, right?
Yeah, and basically he's saying, some of us can't blend in as well as all of you.
Yeah. I was gonna say if Nightcrawler had been in this movie, he might have been intrigued or interested in possibly the cure. So yeah.
Yeah, what happened to him? Why is he not in this movie?
I don't know. They again, according to IMDb trivia, they were going to have him in the film, but then kind of ultimately decided that it wasn't worth spending the money to get him in like full makeup for a day or something, so they just decided.
Yeah, because Nightcrawler was just kind of a throwaway character. No one really was interested in seeing him.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what's worse, not having him in the movie at all, or having him in the movie for one scene and then being like, "See ya, Nightcrawler." Like, I feel like that would have been worse.
That's
probably,
a good point.
So let's jump ahead a little bit and talk about. So Mystique has been captured, which I don't recall happening. Did that happen at the end of X-Men 2? It's very possible it did, and I just don't remember. But She's been captured and is now on a mobile prison. And my note was, a mobile prison seems like a bad idea unless they can somehow refuel without stopping. Because that's the thing that first came into my mind. I was like, they're like, we're going to keep her mobile. They'll never be able to find her. And then the guy's like, well, got to stop for gas. And, every however many 100 miles, he has to stop for gas and is, very vulnerable all of a sudden at that point. But we meet a few, once Magneto comes and finds Mystique, we meet a few new X-Men. We're introduced to Multiple Man, who, again, is underutilized, I think, in this movie. I think the guy literally has 2 lines.
Yeah, you caught me.
Yeah. And then when Magneto first finds him, Mystique says, he robbed 7 banks at the same time. And I forget what Magneto says, but he basically is like, we could use a man of your talents. And then he goes, I'm in.
Yeah, you're right.
And that's it. I think those are his 2 lines.
It wasn't you caught me. It was, I think, I surrender or something.
Yeah.
But, yeah. Yeah, you're right. Who plays him?
I think it was Eric Dane. Double checking. Yeah, Eric Dane, who I believe is from Grey's Anatomy. I don't know that for sure because I've never watched that show, but I believe that was what his claim to fame was. And then after Multiple Man, we're introduced to the Juggernaut, played by Vinnie Jones. Juggernaut, by the way, is not technically a mutant. In the movie, he is.
You're right. He got his powers from a crystal.
Yeah. He's a human in the comics. And he's also, supposedly, Professor X's, stepbrother or something.
Yeah, you're right. It is.
So, but I totally understand
why he wears the helmet.
Right. The helmet is not to protect his pretty face, as he says in the film. It is to keep out psychic attacks, just like Magneto's helmet.
Yep.
But yeah, he's a human in the comics. But I understand why they made him a mutant in the movie. I mean, he's so widely known. I mean, he's from the X-Men comics. He's a part of the Brotherhood of Mutants a lot of the time. So
yes,
it's totally understandable why they would just be like, we'll make him a mutant. Because also it would be difficult to explain how he got his powers from a crystal and stuff like that. So
right,
totally understandable. But technically, he's not a mutant. So he wouldn't have been affected by Leech. Technically,
you're correct.
Yeah.
Huh.
So what did you think about Juggernaut?
It is pretty bad. Yeah, not what I wanted.
I don't hate it. I don't love it necessarily, but I don't hate it. I think Vinnie Jones does about as good of a job as you could do in that role. And I don't think he looks... I wish it had been a little bit more of the classic helmet and everything. But it's not so bad that it makes me want to turn the movie off or anything.
No, you're right. I'll give you that. It could have been a lot worse, but
Yeah.
it to me obviously was just it just didn't do Juggernaut justice.
No, I don't think he does. I don't think he does Juggernaut justice, but it's okay, and I like Vinnie Jones okay, but at least he's used more than Multiple Man.
Yeah.
There's a couple other characters that Magneto recruits who I don't know at all from the comics, really. I don't know who the one character even is. I don't remember hearing her name at all.
Talking about the girl that can teleport?
She's the one that has she's the one that can
or the one with the greaser haircut?
No, she's the one that can Callisto is her character's name, I guess. She's the one that is a speedster but also can sense mutants.
Yeah. That's
she's
what
the
I
one
meant
that goes
by teleporting. It's you're right. It's like speed, but it's it's kind of like teleporting, but yeah, you're right. It's more.
She's supposed to be. It looks like she was super fast. Yeah. And then Arclight was the name of the girl that clapped. She's the one with the greaser haircut. I think you were talking about. And then there's the dude who has porcupine needles.
Yeah, I did not like him at all.
That's a weird power, number one. But also,
it's a lame power. Like, what? Why?
Right.
Like, I think
Out of
they
all
just
the
wanted to have a character that had a cool and what they considered a
Right.
cool, looking thing to have happen.
Speaking of lame powers, I think one of the people with the lamest powers in this movie is when we're in the beginning of the movie and Professor Xavier is teaching a class and you see a girl hovering her hand over the paper and it's writing. She's like writing without a pen, basically. Like that's her power. Is she can write by moving her hand.
Wow.
I was like, that is useless. She's got a lame power. Another guy I think with a lame power is the guy. Also, I don't know. I'd be curious to know if some of these X-Men were just made up. And by X-Men, I meant mutants. Were just made up for the movie, or if they are actually based on characters from the comics. But there's that guy that like grows bone daggers out of his hands and then he throws them.
I'm pretty sure he was a character. I can't remember if I know who he was.
Yeah.
But it just seems like they wouldn't have created that for the movie. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I hear you. And that was why I was curious.
Is this him? I think this might be him. Is his name Spike?
Yeah, probably.
I think it is. And anyway.
So yeah, I'm unfamiliar with some of those characters. I've heard the name Callisto, so I'm pretty sure she was in the comics and also the animated series. I feel like I remember hearing that name on the animated series, but I don't really remember her. And then Arclight and the other guy, I definitely don't remember. So Simon Kinberg, one of the writers for this movie, I feel like is a pretty big X-Men fan, even though he hasn't really done all of the movies justice. He did write Days of Future Past, and that was a good movie. But he also wrote this one, and he also wrote Dark Phoenix and Apocalypse. So,
wow, 1 for 4.
Right? Yeah, basically. So, but I do think he is a fan of the X-Men. So I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of these characters are from the comics.
Yeah,
and they're just very,
kind of like fan only, major,
right.
fan known,
hardcore X-Men fans know who it is. Yeah.
Apparently, Psylocke was in the movie.
I guess I don't recall seeing her.
IMDb.
Yeah, I don't remember seeing her at all. Oh, so one of the other notes I wrote was, and I guess they were trying to be diplomatic, but when Magneto stops the mobile prison, Mystique gets shot with one of the cure darts that are in a gun. They've weaponized the cure, and my first thought was, if they had the cure as a gun, why didn't they just use that? Why have this mobile prison and drive around? But I guess they were trying to be good and not just like taking away people's
whatever. No, I think you're on.
It's a plot hole
here. Why waste their time? Yeah, you're right.
Right. Why waste the time? Why risk having Magneto find them? Why not just shoot?
They're
him with
having
the
to
cure dart?
literally lock her up like maximum security.
Especially Juggernaut. Why wouldn't you shoot Juggernaut with a dart?
Yeah.
Like they have to, according to the file that they read, they have to keep him like confined, locked up at all times. Otherwise he will, break free because he's Juggernaut.
Right.
So
and apparently, I don't, is this part of the comics? I don't remember, but apparently he has to get momentum.
I don't recall either. I could read.
Like, to me, I thought Juggernaut could just rip out, of restraints and stuff like that. But apparently, I guess he has to get momentum to get the strength, which I don't remember that as a
thing. According to Wikipedia, his abilities are superhuman strength, stamina, and durability, invulnerability via mystical force field, virtually unstoppable momentum, and then immunity to mental attacks via his helmet.
Yeah. To me, that doesn't sound like he has to get momentum to get strength.
Once he's got momentum, he's virtually unstoppable.
Yeah.
But yeah, he doesn't have to gain momentum before he's unstoppable.
Right.
Yeah. So that might have been something they kind of changed for the movie. Yeah, so I didn't understand that. Like, if they've got these dart guns, it seems like they would have just used them rather than
Or just give them shots. They don't even have to shoot them.
yeah, they don't even have to shoot them. Just go. Yeah, that would have been smart too, I guess. Yeah, I don't really. Oh, we didn't talk about Scott's death, but I mean, he dies. He goes to Alkali Lake. Jean Grey shows up, and
it's really a mystery. Like, obviously, we know he dies since we've seen the movie, but if it's the first time you've watched it,
you don't know for sure that he's...
Yeah, until the very end when you see his tombstone.
Tombstone, yeah. The note I wrote, which Professor Xavier does kind of explain this, but when she shows up, I wrote... the note I wrote was, has Jean Grey just been living underwater for a year? Because I think it's been about a year since the events of X2, something like that. And then he says later, Professor X says, like, she was wrapped in a cocoon of psychic energy or something like that underneath the lake, I guess. And I guess Scott's eye beam woke her up or something. It's just bizarre.
Yeah, agreed.
And then we also kind of, I feel like there's not a whole lot to talk about the middle of the movie, but I do want to talk about Professor Xavier's death scene.
Well, I was gonna, but real quick. Yeah, let's go ahead and talk about that because it can be tied to it. So go ahead.
Okay, well, I was just gonna say I kind of like the set piece. I like the fight scene within the house. Like, I like Juggernaut and Wolverine's fight inside the house and everything. Like where Juggernaut like throws Wolverine through the ceiling and you see him come down in the other room. I thought that was kind of cool. Although I did wonder why Juggernaut. I feel like Juggernaut and some of Magneto's people are there to keep them out of the house, and the first thing Juggernaut does is throw Wolverine into the house.
That's good. That's a good point. He's not the brightest guy, though.
That's true. He's not known for his brains, I guess.
Actually,
but I do
now that I think about it, comic book Juggernaut
is smart.
I think he might have been kind of smart. I could be
wrong. It's like Bane, like the Batman and Robin version of Bane versus the comic version of Bane.
Yeah, I could be wrong though, but I don't think he wasn't a blubbering idiot.
Right? No, and he's not a blubbering idiot in this movie either. But
yeah,
I don't really recall Juggernaut from the comics, or like how he's portrayed in the comics. My memory of Juggernaut comes from the animated series, and he's not portrayed as being like super smart on the show, but he's not portrayed as being an idiot either. I think he's just He's just a hulking kind of force of nature almost on the show. But the scene with Magneto and Professor Xavier trying to stop Jean Grey, and she just ends up obliterating Professor Xavier. I remember just being bummed by that scene the first time I saw it because they killed off Professor X.
Yeah, it was definitely a sad moment.
Yeah.
Especially the look he gives when he is it Logan he looks at?
Yeah, he's looking at Logan, yeah.
Yeah. Kind of smiles and then just
knowing that he's
I was going to ask you though, I don't recall it going over what Phoenix really was.
He kind of explains it as being like it was always a part of her, and Professor X kind of like psychically locked it away when she was younger because it was too powerful of a force. It was like a force that already lived in her from birth.
That is not.
No, it's not at all. No. But that's how they kind of explain it in the movie. It's like it's always been a part of her. He had psychically kind of locked it away, and if he hadn't done that, Phoenix power or whatever would have taken her over long ago, and Phoenix is just too powerful, and so
if I'm not mistaken, in the comics, Phoenix was kind of like a goddess, right? That was stuck down in. Or locked away kind of down in this crater. And
you might remember more than I do.
basically possesses Jean Grey's body.
Yeah, I looked up on Wikipedia because I did want to, kind of see what the actual Phoenix story was. And the Phoenix Force is the sum of all life in the universe, according to this. The Phoenix Force, the sum of all life in the universe, is moved by Jean's dedication and love and takes the form of a duplicate body to house Jean's psyche. This is all when it's in space.
Yeah, because
I
knew it was like space related.
Right. The Phoenix Force is overwhelmed and believes itself to be Jean Grey and places Jean's dying body in a healing cocoon. The cocoon is later described as a phoenix egg. The ship crashes in Jamaica Bay with the other X-Men unharmed. The Phoenix Force, as Jean Grey, emerges in a new costume and adopts the codename Phoenix. So it's like Phoenix is not actually Jean Grey. It's like
Phoenix,
almost like a clone. Yeah. Meanwhile, the cocoon containing the real Jean Grey sinks to the bottom of the bay unnoticed. Phoenix continues her life as Jean Grey with the other X-Men, joining them on missions and saving the universe. During the Dark Phoenix saga, Phoenix becomes overwhelmed and corrupted by her first taste of evil and transforms into a force of total destruction called Dark Phoenix, inadvertently killing the inhabitants of a planetary system after consuming its star and jeopardizing the entire universe. So she's obviously very powerful.
Yes, she is.
But she's not technically Jean Grey, which is interesting. It's probably one of those things. It was probably one of those things where like it was one of those things where they probably retroactively were like, well, it's actually Jean Grey's body has been at the bottom of the lake the whole time, and like you didn't know it, type of thing.
Right. It was like originally it was Jean Grey, and they're like,
and then they kind of reworked it.
That.
They retconned it. Yeah. So it's nothing like it is in the movie. In the movie, they were, it has been a part of her this whole time, because that's when she comes back, when they find her and she comes back and they're in the mansion. Professor Xavier is trying to put those psychic locks back in place. Then he gets into an argument with Logan, because Logan was like, they thought that it was kind of unethical, and thinks that Jean Grey should have a choice about what kind of, psychic locks he's putting on her mind and stuff. And I remember Professor X goes, I don't have to explain myself to you.
Right. I love that. Professor Xavier.
Right. And
You're
so,
Logan.
You're just Logan. Get out of my sight. And I guess they were kind of setting that up in that first scene, with Jean being powerful and lifting all the cars up at such a young age and everything. And Magneto, I like this one. But yeah, that was one of the reasons I think a lot of people dislike this movie, is because they just totally butchered the Phoenix story.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you kind of think with Dark Phoenix, you see them going to space, you're like, oh, okay, they're going to get it right this time. But they don't. So, yeah. It's just weird. I like part 2 kind of ended with her death, and you see the Phoenix in the water, the outline of like the Phoenix logo in the water. So it was like they almost didn't have a choice but to do that in this movie.
Well, like you said though, like if Bryan Singer left in the middle of pre-production, like that was obviously the direction they were going to be going.
Right. Like, and I don't know what changes were made to the script after Bryan Singer left, but yeah, who knows? Maybe this was kind of the direction he was headed, was to do it this way. I don't know. Because clearly they can't, she supposedly died, so you can't like bring her back and then send her to space to get the Phoenix story. So they had to kind of figure it out some way. So this was what they came up with, that it was inside of her all along. I don't know. They did what they could.
Well, but she doesn't become Phoenix in space. It does take place on Earth, and then they go to space.
Well, yes. But she gets hit with the radiation in space, and that's where she comes across the Phoenix Force, is in space. Right? According to the Wikipedia I just read.
Oh.
Jean pilots the shuttle back to Earth, but is exposed to fatal levels of radiation. Dying but determined to
Oh.
save Cyclops and her friends, Jean calls out for help and is answered by the cosmic entity, the Phoenix Force.
See, I don't remember that. And the only like I said, I don't have any knowledge of Phoenix except from the animated series.
Yeah, and I
And
know I say
hearing, hearing like my friends talk about Phoenix around that time,
Yeah.
and they had read or at least had some kind of knowledge of the comics, and I don't remember them being in space before Phoenix, but maybe they were. So, and obviously the animated series isn't canon over comics,
right.
so,
They have to make some changes too.
yeah.
But I was gonna actually. I know I say this a lot. But I was going to watch the Phoenix Saga episodes before we talked, before we did this episode. But I ran out of time. I didn't have the time to watch because it's like a 5 or 6, episode arc.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure I have seen it, but I haven't seen it since I was a kid probably. So
Yeah.
I did want to rewatch it, but
I
didn't get the
actually
chance.
have the Phoenix action figure
Nice.
from
I
the
don't.
animated series.
I had a few X-Men action figures, but I didn't have that many. I had Wolverine, and I think I had Cyclops. I had Professor X,
Are you
which is kind of
kidding me?
cool. About Cyclops?
I had like at least 40.
No, I didn't. I didn't have nearly that many,
X-Men,
which is weird because I loved that show, and I'm surprised I didn't ask my parents for more
Yeah.
X-Men figures. But yeah, I didn't have very many.
I think you and I talked about the Turtles and how you
Yeah.
and I had really a handful of them, and like our friends had like
A bunch.
a
Yeah.
bunch of like all these others that we didn't. But X-Men to me was the one where I had so many different. I had ones of characters that just whatever. I even have Cyclops' father. And he's in the Phoenix Saga. He's like the space pirate guy. I can't remember his name.
Oh wow.
I have a figure of him. And so, yeah, I had a bunch of them. And it's a toss-up between X-Men or Star Wars, which one I had more. But I think I probably had more X-Men figures
Wow.
than I did even Star Wars.
That's pretty good. I definitely had more Star Wars, but I didn't. I did have like my brother had some Star Wars figures from like the original movies, but most of the Star Wars figures I had was from the re-released movies and the prequels.
And what's funny is when I started getting those was after I was done with the X-Men.
Uh-huh.
And after I was done with X-Men, I was like, I'm done with figures. Like, I'm in middle school. Why do I want figures? And then Star Wars came out and was like,
give me all the figures.
I got like 1 or 2, and then I was like, okay, I need some more.
Yeah.
And then it just kept growing and growing.
Yeah, I mean, like, I've always loved collecting figures. And as I get older, I moved on from like the action figures and more of like the collectible figures, that
Right.
like are meant for being displayed. But I have since in the past few years kind of gotten out of even that, because I just have run out of room. Really, I just don't know. I have gotten into Funko Pops, but I've run out of room for those too. So I think I've just kind of my collectible days might be kind of behind me. But
Yeah.
until I buy a bigger house or something. But yeah, I used to. I know I've got a Gambit in the box, but I bought that as an adult. I found it at like a comic book store or something, and I bought it, and it wasn't very much. So it's not. I don't think it's worth anything. But yeah, I don't think I had very many. I know I had Professor X in the chair, and I had Wolverine. I think I had a Weapon X figure, which is pretty cool. And then other than that, I don't remember. I think I had Cyclops, and that might have been it.
I think I had 7 different versions of Wolverine.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. That doesn't surprise me.
I had Weapon X. I had the
Yeah.
original. I had the traditional yellow suit. I had a blue and yellow suit without the mask. I had a Wolverine where his arms would go up and down. That might have been it. I can't think of any others, but yeah, I had lots of different variations of Wolverine. I had 2 different apocalypses. I had 2 or 3 different Sabretooths. I had 2 different Magnetos. Yeah, I had a bunch.
I might have had a Magneto now that you say that.
It was interesting because I had one like which was from the original series, and then there was another one that after different companies started making different versions of the figures, and one of the Magnetos was almost like an anime looking.
Oh, interesting.
He was weird. He had like really long hair like down between his shoulder blades that was like in a ponytail. He was really cool looking actually. But
I forgot the biggest X-Men figure I had. I had Apocalypse.
Yep.
I think you had the same figure, I know, because I think you've sent me a picture of it. It's the one where like his arms and legs you could like kind of extend.
That's actually from the original series of figures.
Yeah.
And then they came out with another one later that was more like what he looked like in the show.
Gotcha.
And he was like kind of bigger and bulkier and everything.
I want to get back to X-Men 3, but real quick, I remember one of the before DVDs were a thing where they released television shows on DVD. Pizza Hut had a promotion one time where if you bought, I don't remember what kind of pizza it was, but if you bought something, you would get a VHS copy of X-Men the Animated Series. So I had like the first 3 episodes of X-Men the Animated Series on VHS that I got from Pizza Hut.
Yeah, it's awesome. I at least remember the promotion. I don't know if I owned one. It seems like I might have because I remember knowing that the first episode was called Night of the Sentinels, and I think that was how I knew it was called that was because it was on the VHS.
VHS, yeah. That was cool. I don't like Pizza Hut doesn't do. I mean, Pizza Hut is obviously still good pizza and all that, but they don't do any cool promotions like that anymore.
Right.
And even if they did, it would be for kids shows now that have no interest in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it would.
Yeah,
it just wouldn't be
time.
Totally different time. Totally different time. So back to X-Men 3. Let's talk about the kind of the finale of the Alcatraz battle. And the first
Did
thing
you
that
notice that when they're getting off the bridge, it's daytime?
And then all of a sudden it's nighttime.
And then
like
it cuts
2 minutes later.
to them getting there's like this whole scene where they're like talking or something, and the lady locks her doors. And it's daytime, and then it cuts to them like running off the bridge onto the island, and it's night.
Yeah, I guess now that you mention it, yes, I do realize I realize that now, but I guess I didn't really pick up on it when I was watching the movie. I assume it was kind of dusk when he was moving the bridge, but yeah, no, that's a pretty quick cut for it to go from day to night.
It was, yes.
The note that I wrote has to do with that family, the woman that locks her door. So they, Magneto he like lands on the bridge. I don't know if he did something to the bridge first, but some of the cars kind of crash. And the family can't get out of their car. They're like, we're trapped. And the way they make it look like is that all 4 doors have been trapped. Like there's a car on both sides. Like they can't open their doors.
Right.
But when you cut to the wide shot, there's not a single car in that wide shot that is blocked on both sides. And so I feel like the dad was like, we're trapped. And the mom was just like, I can get out, but I don't want to. I don't know. It was really weird to me. And then there was that scene with Magneto where she locks the door, which is funny, but it makes me wonder if that family in the car, that was like maybe a reshoot, something they shot later and added it in. Because like I said, it doesn't fit in the wide shot. But I don't know. It was just kind of weird to me. But the other note I wrote was after Magneto moves the bridge, they show a wide shot of the bridge. And it is going from Alcatraz to the mainland. But the middle columns, whatever you want to call it, are like not even touching the water. And I was like, I don't think that bridge would have.
That's a good
I think
point.
that bridge would have collapsed,
Folded in itself.
Yeah. And it was like structurally, I don't think it's sound.
Unless Magneto's holding
it up, which is very
together.
possible, I suppose.
But they don't even need the bridge. Like they're at the edge.
Yeah, I didn't understand that either, really, because like you don't see, unless all the other mutants were on the mainland just waiting there to then cross the bridge, but we don't ever get a shot of that or anything.
He literally could have like just cut a piece of the bridge off and then floated them all over.
Yeah, I don't know why. I mean, it was obviously something they did for spectacle
Effect,
for the movie, I guess. But yeah, it wasn't really, that part wasn't explained very well, I don't think.
And then it cuts to, them invading the island, and then you have all the X-Men show up, and you have Colossus and Wolverine. And my note that I wrote was, which he actually ends up doing later, but one of my notes was, why doesn't, like, it shows Colossus.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why doesn't he just crush Colossus like a can?
That's true.
He just...
That's true. Magneto could have just been like...
Yep. And he's gone. And then I was like, Colossus. And for that matter, why doesn't he do Wolverine? He's already done that once. Like, why is Wolverine a threat to Magneto? But then later on in the battle, he does, like, move and, like, confine Wolverine because he's metal.
Yeah, and says, you'll never learn. Yeah, and I like that scene because I had that... I forgot how this movie kind of ends. And I thought that as he was like, telling Colossus to throw him. That would have been hilarious, actually, if he was like talking to Colossus and he goes, make it a strike. And then they both just like crumple because Magneto just crushes them both. It would have been a downer of an ending, obviously. But anyway, I had that thought. I was like, why is he throwing himself towards Magneto when he knows that Magneto is going to stop him? And then I realized that was part of the plan. It was a trick. It was a decoy. So that Beast could come and stab him with the cure.
Yeah.
The note I wrote was, and we didn't really talk about this at the beginning, but when they're in the danger room in the very beginning of the movie, the whole thing is they need to work as a team, but they're not a team yet. Logan's like, these kids aren't ready. And so he's the one that goes and decapitates the Sentinel and everything. So at the end of the movie, I wrote, look, now they're working as a team, even though they haven't practiced again at all. Like they just suddenly know that they have to work as a team, and they do it perfectly.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a little convenient. The other note I wrote was, why does Magneto still wear the helmet when he knows that Xavier is dead? I mean, maybe there's other psychics out there, so that's why he's doing it.
That's a good question. He does it for Xavier. I mean, let's be honest.
In remembrance of Xavier. Yeah, no. He's definitely wearing... I mean, the helmet was created... according to the movies, was created to keep Xavier out.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's just if I'm not mistaken, I think that's in the comics
also
too.
The comics too. So I just didn't understand why he was still wearing it, unless he just is like, this is what Magneto
he's like,
wears.
I've been wearing this thing for so long. This is how people know me. So
right,
I'll just keep wearing it.
I gotta keep it.
Plus,
it's my
cool
look.
Looking.
It's my look.
It's
man.
a cool helmet. So
yeah,
it's like I did a good job on this one. Of course, he's been wearing it for a long time too. So
we kind of already have talked about my other notes. One of my notes was Jean not doing anything during the final battle? Because I really think she was just standing there.
Yeah, no, you're right.
For most of it until Magneto gets cured. Before we jump,
and the way and their interaction with each other, it's almost like Magneto's trying to still convince her. He's like, "Hey, watch this battle, and then I'll prove to you why you should help me." Like.
Yeah, and then the other note I wrote was, once she starts destroying the place, he goes, what have I done? And I thought that was weird.
Yeah,
like,
I agree.
He's suddenly like, he like didn't know she was going to destroy the place. I mean, I feel like he also wouldn't care. He's just been cured. I feel like he'd be super angry and want the place to burn.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It was weird.
That was out of character, I thought. One more thing I think we have to talk about before we move on is the infamous, I can't say it because we're a family-friendly podcast, but the infamous "I'm the Juggernaut" line. That was brought about because of there was some popular videos where people had dubbed over the animated series, and that was basically all they said was "I'm the Juggernaut," and they were hilarious. And Brett Ratner saw that while they were making the movie and said, well, we got to put this in the movie. And so they did. And it's
awful.
Cringeworthy.
It's so bad.
Yeah.
It's the scene I think of when I think of
when you think of
Last
X-Men
Stand.
3.
That's it. Like, that's the first thing that pops in my mind.
Yeah.
Is it not for you?
Yeah, pretty much. That and... what else comes to mind? Beast comes to mind. But it would be either that scene or the scene with Jean Grey disintegrating parts of
Mm-hmm.
Wolverine as he's trying to walk
Yep.
up to her.
Oh, really? Thought you were gonna say Professor Xavier.
Or that too.
Yeah.
But yeah, when X-Men 3 pops into my brain, I think the scene that always comes to mind first is that scene with Jean Grey where Wolverine is trying to walk to her and parts of his body
I had
keep getting
forgotten
kind of
about that.
burned
honestly.
off, and which I kind of like, but it's also just it's just weird again because she hasn't really done anything that whole scene, and then yeah, I don't know, and then Wolverine kills her, and that's the end of it. And that's pretty much the movie. I mean, we get a scene at the school. Storm is, I guess, now the leader of the school. Halle Berry didn't want to come back for this movie because she didn't think that her character really had enough to do in the last couple of movies, I guess. And so they promised her more to do in this film, which is I think it worked with Cyclops going away and her becoming the head of the school. But I also don't think it's that big of a role either,
Yeah.
But it would have been weird if they had recast it. So I'm kind of glad that they still have Halle Berry in the role.
Yeah, I agree.
Also, she spins a lot in this movie, which is something I don't really feel like.
Spins?
Yeah, she constantly is in the air spinning in this movie.
Oh, like a tornado kind of?
Yeah. Which I was like, that's not. I don't feel like that's what Storm does, but that's what she did in this movie. She does it a couple times. And she does it in the Danger Room, and then she does it outside of Jean Grey's house when they're kind of fighting the Brotherhood of Mutants people. So I guess it's twice, but it's just more than I really. It's more than I really think Storm spins.
Yeah,
but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong.
I don't think she spins.
Um,
She just controls weather. She doesn't need to spin to do that.
Yeah. So then the last couple things. I did want to say, what did you think of when you finally see Iceman turn into all ice?
So I hated it
Yeah.
when I saw it in the theater.
Mm-hmm.
It felt so bad. It just really threw me. And I guess it's weird. I never thought I'd say this, but watching it this time, I didn't hate it.
Yeah.
And I think it's because with it being visuals from 2006.
Yeah.
And it already looking dated, I could look at it and be okay with it because I wasn't expecting, the fact that it didn't look fantastic fit with the movie anyway. So
Right.
it actually looked better than I remembered, honestly.
Well, that's good. I never hated it. I don't think it looks like how he looked in the comics. I obviously know. I mean, they tried to make it look more realistic than he looks in the comics, I guess. And one of the things that's always thrown me off of it was Iceman in the comics has always just looked almost like a sculpture of ice.
Right.
Whereas in this movie, you could see his costume. His costume was also made of ice.
Right.
And I thought that was kind of weird. But I would be interested to see when Marvel Studios reboots X-Men, if we see more of kind of a traditional looking.
He wears clothes.
He does, but when he's all ice, I feel like you can't see clothes. You just see he looks almost like a mannequin of ice. I think. I'll look it up.
I don't think so.
Well,
I think you're mistaken.
Okay. Well, I think we're both kind of right. It looks like he kind of had a Speedo on, so you could kind of see that through the ice.
Yes, correct. And the Speedo, it's like Superman pants, basically, and they're ice.
Yes.
Right.
So we're both kind of right. I guess, yeah.
But
he doesn't.
But in this movie, you're right. It's the whole costume.
Yeah. You can see, the X on his collar and stuff is in the ice and everything. But yeah, I didn't think it actually looked. I think I'm kind of in the same boat with you. I think it actually, watching it today, thought it looked better than I remember. But I never hated it in the first place like you did.
See, because when I first saw it in the theater, it looked so fake to me. It just looked. The animation was not smooth to where
Right.
it just looked like CGI to me, massive. And like I said, being 14 years old now, it didn't bother me.
I also remember thinking Colossus looked really cool in this movie. But watching it today, I felt like he was barely in this movie too. Like
You're right.
You didn't really.
Yeah,
see
you're
him
right.
much.
It seemed like back when it came out, like we were like, oh, we're finally getting some Colossus.
Colossus, yeah.
But then again, he was maybe I'm thinking of X2 because he was kind of an X2 also.
He was in X2 for one scene.
Okay, yeah, you're right. And then you're right. And then X-Men 3, it was like, oh, we're
gonna get to see him in the whole movie.
Yeah.
But
Right, he was barely
in it too. But now that Deadpool has come out and we've got the Colossus from Deadpool, who looks very much more like how he looks in the comics and everything.
Was he in Deadpool 1?
Yeah, he's in both.
Well, I haven't seen the second one yet.
Yeah, I know. I prefer the look of Colossus from Deadpool than I do from this movie. But back when this movie came out, the movie wasn't a thing yet, and so this was the only Colossus we had, and I thought he looked pretty good back then.
Deadpool was Fox also, right?
Yeah, so Disney now owns Deadpool as well.
How is there not a Deadpool 3 yet?
I don't know, but I assume there will be.
Yeah, I would imagine.
But yeah. So the last thing that happens in this movie is we get a shot of Magneto sitting at a chessboard with some metal chess pieces, and he makes one move a little, and then cut to credits.
It's very quick.
Very quick.
It's like almost the second
blink and
you
miss
see it. Yeah.
Which I like. I like that it's one of those. It's kind of like the end of Inception. Yeah.
Except not as much. Like, I know what you're saying because I was thinking the same thing, but Inception, it doesn't show what happens. It leaves, and you do see that he did in fact move the chess piece.
Right. Yes.
And in Inception, the top is like it's almost falling, but it doesn't, and then
you cut.
Yeah.
Right. I agree. But I like the ending. All right. I thought it was kind of cool that they kind of left it open ended a little bit, and it would also kind of explain how they have their powers in Days of Future Past, because if the cure was not permanent,
except for the fact that Charles Xavier is
right,
alive.
that's the only part that doesn't really. I mean, the movie does explain that, because I don't know, did you watch the end credits scene? There's a scene after the credits.
Mm-mm.
So in the earlier in the film, when Professor Xavier is teaching his class, Moira McTaggart is introduced, and he was saying that this man has no conscience to speak of, but he's basically a vegetable, but so he has no conscience, but like all of his vital organs work and all that stuff, I guess, right?
Oh yeah, that's right. I remember that.
And Professor X starts to get into a conversation about ethics and about, what if we were to transfer consciousness into that person? But then he's interrupted by Storm, and he dismisses class. Well, cut to the very end credits of this film. After the end credits scene, it shows that guy in the bed, the vegetable guy.
That's
and,
right.
Moira McTaggart walks in, and then you hear Patrick Stewart's voice say, Moira.
That's right. I remember that.
And so it's hinted that he has transferred his consciousness into this dude.
Who was nowhere near Jean Grey's old house.
Right. Yeah. I don't know where it was, but yeah, I don't know how he did it.
Right before death, I guess. Like, he's like that guy in the bed.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. But it's hinted that he kind of survives through this other guy. But it also doesn't explain why he looks like Professor Xavier in Days of Future Past. Unless he's psychically sending that image to everyone he meets. I don't know.
That's funny.
So yeah, that is X-Men 3. X-Men The Last Stand. Not technically X-Men 3. X-Men The Last Stand. I don't really have much else to say about it. I guess we can go into a rating.
Yeah, I agree.
What would you give this film, John?
Higher than I was expecting. I would give it 3.5 out of 5 stars.
3.5? That's higher than I was expecting too.
It's higher than I was expecting because, like I said, when I was watching it, a lot of the scenes, I was like, this does feel way more X-Men than I
than you remembered.
And I liked the story, you know, of the cure, and yeah, I'm gonna go with 3.5 out of 5.
Wow. I was originally thinking 2.5. But I think I might give it an extra half star just for Kelsey Grammer as Beast.
Yeah, no kidding.
So I'll give it 3 stars. Yeah. Like I said, I've never hated this movie, but it is one of the weaker X-Men films. And it's definitely the weakest out of the first 3. But yeah, it's watchable, and I'm not sitting there like hating myself the whole time I'm watching it. Like it's not a bad Sunday afternoon watch, you know? So 3 stars I think is fine. Well, we'd love to know what you think about X-Men The Last Stand. You can always leave a comment on our website, www.cinemaheroes.com. You can leave a comment on our Facebook, facebook.com/SM and SM Podcast. You can also tweet at us on Twitter @CinemaHeroes. That's our Instagram handle as well. And you can leave a comment on this YouTube video, of course, if you're watching it on YouTube. Leave a comment, give us a thumbs up, share the video, subscribe. We'd love all that. We'd love to hear from you. I think that about wraps it up for this episode. I'm Justin Spick.
I'm John Pelzel.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for subscribing.